Perfection always demands a price. In the realms of mortals we pay with sweat, with time, with gold. But in the celestial citadel of the gods, perfection is paid for in blood, in deceit, and in the shattered skulls of those foolish enough to ask the Aesir to honor their debts.
Welcome back to Nordic Lore. I'm Tom, your resident skeptic, occasional punching bag for ancient deities, and your tour guide through the absolute madness of this mythology.
And I am Dr. Arthur Pendelton. I have a fresh cup of Earl Grey steeped, and today we are ascending the Rainbow Bridge. We are walking directly into Asgard, the legendary, untouchable fortress of the Norse gods.
Last time we talked about the creation of the cosmos, which mostly involved a primordial giant named Ymir being carved up into celestial real estate. But today, we are focusing exclusively on the penthouse suite of the universe, Asgard.
Precisely. When the gods, the Aesir, first established their home in the center of the world, they sought to build a utopia. They constructed a temple called Gladsheim, which housed 12 high seats alongside the All-Father Odin's throne. It was a marvel. Inside and out, it was forged of pure, unadulterated gold.
Pure gold. No subtlety there?
None at all. They also built Vingolf, a breathtakingly beautiful sanctuary for the goddesses. They built forges, crafted hammers, tongs, and anvils, and wrought so much gold that all their furnishings and tools were made of it. This era was literally called the Golden Age.
It sounds like a glittering perfect paradise. What went wrong?
Well, according to the lore, the Golden Age was spoiled by the arrival of women from Jotunheim, the realm of the giants.
Oh, of course. Blame the giantesses for ruining the all-gold interior design. Before we get into the inevitable destruction and bloodshed, Arthur, we need to know who actually lives in these golden halls. Who walks the gleaming floors of Gladsheim and Vingolf?
The pantheon is vast, Tom. Let us do a roll call of the divine residents. First, the Aesir and the Vanir, the male gods. At the absolute pinnacle sits Odin, the All-Father, the oldest and highest, who rules over all things.
The big boss.
Yes. Then there is Thor, Asa Thor, the absolute strongest of all gods and men. He wields the crushing hammer Mjolnir, iron gloves, and a belt that doubles his divine strength. Then we have Balder, the wisest, most beautifully radiant and mildest of them all, yet tragically a god whose judgments can never hold or stand.
Beautiful, but legally powerless. Got it.
We also have the Vanir gods, who live in Asgard as hostages of peace. Njord, who controls the winds, calms the sea and fire, and grants wealth. And his son, Frey, the foremost of the Aesir, who commands the rain, the sunshine, and the fruits of the earth.
Okay, those are the heavy hitters, the elemental forces.
Then it gets delightfully specific and brutal. We have Tyr, the bravest god of martial courage. He is famous for being one-handed, having sacrificed his own limb to the jaws of the Fenris wolf just so the gods could bind the beast.
A god missing a hand because he used it as wolf bait. Incredible.
There is Brage, the god of supreme wisdom, eloquence, and the art of poetry. Then Heimdall, the white Aes, the great watchman of the gods. He was born of 9 maiden sisters.
Wait, pause. He has 9 mothers. How does that even biologically work?
The myth doesn't concern itself with mortal biology, Tom. Heimdall sits at the edge of heaven to guard the bridge Bifrost. He needs less sleep than a bird, can see for 100 leagues in the dark, and can literally hear grass growing from the soil and wool growing on sheep.
Hearing wool grow sounds like a fast track to insanity, but sure. Who else?
We have Hod, who is immensely strong but entirely blind. Vidar, the silent As, who possesses a very thick shoe and is the second strongest after Thor.
Wait, a thick shoe? That's his defining godly trait? The god of the orthopedic insert?
Do not mock the shoe, Tom. That shoe is made from the leather scraps men cut from their toes and heels, and Vidar will use it at the end of the world to step on the Fenris wolf's jaw and tear it apart to avenge Odin.
Okay, note to self. Respect the shoe.
We also have Vale, son of Odin and Rind, a daring warrior in battle and an unmatched archer. Ul, the stepson of Thor, who is so good at archery and skiing that no one can compete with him.
A skiing god. Excellent.
Forsete, the supreme judge who settles all difficult disputes in his golden hall, Gleipnir. And finally, counted among them, is Loki, handsome but malicious in mind, a trickster of giant blood who constantly drags the gods into lethal danger only to save them with his cunning.
The architect of chaos. So that's the men. What about the women, the Asynjur?
The Asynjur are equally fascinating. At the top is Frigg, Odin's wife, who knows the fates of all mankind, but speaks no prophecies. Standing equal to her is Freya, a goddess of love who drives a chariot pulled by cats.
Pulled by cats. Terrifying.
Do not underestimate her. When she rides to battle, she claims half of all the slain corpses, leaving the other half to Odin. We also have Sif, Thor's wife, Skade, a giantess and ski goddess who married Njord. She famously hated his beach house and preferred the freezing mountains and the howling of wolves. Idun, who guards the magical apples that keep the gods from aging. Saga, the seeress who drinks daily with Odin in her hall. Air, the supreme physician.
Okay, so love, war, medicine, skiing.
Then come the highly specialized goddesses. Gefjun, served by all women who die as virgins. Fulla, a maiden with flowing hair bound by a golden band, who carries Frigg's casket and knows her secrets. Sjorven, who turns the minds of men and women to passionate love. Loven, the mild goddess who secures permission from the All-Father and Frigg for forbidden marriages.
The goddess of eloping.
And her dark counterpart, Var. She listens to the oaths sworn between men and women, and she ruthlessly takes revenge on those who break their vows.
The goddess of the bad breakup. I love her.
Vor, a goddess of such deep wisdom that nothing can be hidden from her. Sin, the guardian of the hall doors who blocks those denied entry, and who defends against false claims at trials.
Sin is literally the bouncer of Asgard.
Exactly. Then there is Hlyn, appointed to protect anyone Frigg wishes to save from peril. Snotra, the goddess of wisdom and courtesy. Gna, Frigg's messenger who rides a flying sea-crossing horse called Hofvapnir. Sigyn, Loki's tragic wife. Nanna, Baldur's devoted wife. Sol and Bil, the personifications of the sun and the waning moon. Jord, the earth, and Rind, both counted among the goddesses. And lastly, the fierce Valkyries, like Rist, Mist, Skogul, and Hild, who serve in Valhalla, choose the slain in battle, and govern victory.
It's an incredible, overwhelming list of deities. But let's shatter this Golden Age illusion. You mentioned earlier that Asgard was a fortress, but building an impenetrable citadel for this massive pantheon wasn't exactly a DIY project, was it?
No, it was not. In the early days, after the gods had built Midgard and Valhalla, a mysterious smith arrived. He made them a bold offer. He would build a fortress so strong that it would be entirely secure against the mountain giants and frost giants, even if they managed to breach Midgard.
Sounds like exactly what they needed. What was the catch?
The price. The builder demanded to be given the goddess Freya as his wife, and he also demanded the sun and the moon.
Just the literal celestial bodies that give light to the world and the goddess of love. A very reasonable contractor's fee.
The gods were outraged, but they held a council. They decided to strike a deceitful bargain. They agreed to his price, but only if he could finish the entire fortress in a single winter. If even the smallest part of the wall was unfinished on the first day of summer, he would forfeit his payment. Furthermore, he was forbidden to use any human help.
They were setting him up to fail.
Exactly. But the builder asked for one concession. He asked if he could use his horse, a massive stallion named Svadilfari. The gods hesitated, but Loki advised them to allow it. They severely underestimated this horse. Svadilfari was a monster of a draft animal. By day, the builder constructed the wall, and by night, he used the stallion to haul the stones. The gods watched in absolute awe and growing horror as this horse dragged whole mountains of rock to the citadel. The stallion was doing twice the work of the mighty builder.
I can imagine the gods standing on their golden balconies, sipping their mead, slowly realizing they're about to lose the sun, the moon, and Freya to a guy with a really strong horse.
Panic set in. The winter drew to a close. With just 3 days left until summer, the wall was incredibly high, immensely strong, and entirely unassailable. It was virtually finished, right up to the fortress gate.
3 days. They are about to plunge the universe into eternal darkness.
The gods summoned a frantic council. They sat on their judgment seats and demanded to know who had given the terrible advice to risk Freya, the sky, and the stars. The blame fell squarely on the one who causes the most evil, Loki. They surrounded him and swore he would suffer a torturous, agonizing death if he didn't find a way to break the contract.
So Loki, facing a violent death at the hands of very angry deities, has to improvise. What does the trickster do?
He terrified them, but he swore an oath that he would manage it. That very evening, the builder drove his stallion, Svadilfari, out to gather more stone.
Okay.
Out from the dark woods trotted a mare. She pranced toward the massive stallion and whinnied at him.
Wait, Loki turned himself into a female horse?
He did. When Svadilfari realized what kind of horse was calling to him, he went completely mad with lust. He snapped his heavy hauling ropes, abandoned the stone, and bolted toward the mare. The mare, Loki, fled deep into the forest, and the massive stallion chased her all night long.
This is mythology at its absolute finest. To save the universe, the god of trickery turns into a horse to seduce a magical draft animal.
The builder chased after his horse all night, but he couldn't catch him. Because of this erotic pursuit in the woods, the work was delayed. The next day, the wall could not be built. When the builder realized he was going to fail and lose his payment, he was consumed by a terrifying, monstrous, giant rage.
Ah, so he wasn't just a human contractor.
No, the illusion dropped. He was a mountain giant. When the Aesir saw his true nature, they no longer cared about their holy oaths. The contract was voided by their fear and prejudice. They called out a single name: Thor.
Seriously?
Thor appeared in an instant. He didn't pay the giant with the sun and the moon. He paid the building wage by swinging the hammer Mjolnir into the air and bringing it down with such cataclysmic force that it shattered the giant's skull into fragments, sending him plunging down into the dark abyss of Niflhel.
Talk about a hostile work environment. They cheat a guy out of his wage, sabotage his equipment by seducing his horse, and then cave his head in when he gets mad about it.
It is the brutal reality of Asgard, Tom. The Golden Age was over. The fortress was built, but it was sealed with deception and murder. And speaking of the consequences of Loki's shape-shifting, he spent enough time with that stallion in the woods that he eventually gave birth.
He gave birth?
To an 8-legged horse. But that, and the bloody reality of Odin's own sacrifices to maintain this power.
Wait. Let me just process this. You glossed over something absolutely insane. Loki, the male god of trickery, turned himself into a female horse, seduced a giant draft stallion, and then personally gave birth?
He did indeed. Loki spent so much time in the deep, dark woods with the stallion Svadilfari that he eventually birthed a foal. But this was no ordinary foal. It was a grey horse with 8 legs, named Gleipnir, and it is universally considered the best and most magnificent horse among gods and men.
8 legs. So Odin, the supreme, all-powerful ruler of the cosmos, rides around on his blood brother's 8-legged horse child? That must make family gatherings incredibly awkward.
In Asgard, power trumps conventional morality, Tom. Odin rides Sleipnir through the skies and down into the darkest realms, even to the gates of hell. He is the All-Father, the supreme ruler who watches over every human endeavor from his high seat, Hlidskjalf. But you must understand, that omniscient gaze, that supreme intellect, was not simply given to him. He was not born all-knowing. In the Norse cosmos, true, absolute power demands a horrific price. Odin is a god, defined by his relentless, bloody, and agonizing pursuit of wisdom.
Okay, you've set the ominous tone perfectly. What kind of price are we talking about? I assume he didn't just read a lot of books.
To understand the cosmos, one must endure physical mutilation. Beneath the world tree Yggdrasil, there are 3 massive roots. One of these roots stretches endlessly out toward the frozen wastelands of the frost giants. And beneath that specific root lies a dark, primordial pool known as Mimir's Well.
Mimir? The guy with the severed head you mentioned in passing before?
The very same, though at this point in the mythos, he is whole. The well he guards conceals absolute wisdom and profound intellect. Every single morning, Mimir drinks from this freezing water, using the massive horn, Gjallarhorn, filling himself with ancient knowledge. Odin traveled to this desolate place and demanded a single drink from the well.
Let me guess. Mimir didn't just hand over a glass?
No. Mimir knew the value of the water. He told the All-Father that he could drink, but only if he left his own eye as a pledge.
Oh my God.
Odin did not hesitate. For the sake of ultimate knowledge, the supreme god reached up, gouged his own eye from his skull, and dropped it into the freezing depths of the well.
Oh God. He just ripped it out? No hesitation, no negotiation, just, here's my eyeball. Hand over the water?
He left it there as an eternal pledge. But Tom, losing an eye was merely the beginning of his suffering. To understand the world is one thing. To bend it to your will, to grasp the dark, fundamental magic of the runes, requires an agony that borders on the incomprehensible.
You're telling me gouging out his own eye was the easy part?
Yes. For the magic of the runes, Odin committed the ultimate act of dark sacrifice. He sacrificed himself to himself.
Mm-hmm.
Odin went to the wind-swept branches of the world tree Yggdrasil. He tied a noose, slipped it around his own neck, and hung himself from the colossal branches. But hanging was not enough. To seal the sacrifice, he drove his own spear deep into his side, piercing his flesh.
He crucified himself on a tree?
For 9 full nights, he hung there in the freezing, howling void. He was given no bread to eat, nor a single drop of mead from a horn to soothe his cracked lips. He was starving, bleeding, suffocating, hovering on the exact razor-thin precipice between life and death. He stared down into the fathomless abyss below the roots, and finally, in the absolute peak of his agony, the screaming runes revealed themselves to him. He took them up with a cry and fell back from the tree, forever changed.
That is terrifying. He literally starved and tortured himself to the brink of death just to learn magic. It's like a macabre obsession. He's an addict, but the drug is power.
An incredibly accurate assessment, because his thirst for intellect didn't stop there. He also orchestrated theft, deceit, and manipulation to steal the mead of poetry.
The mead of poetry? That sounds surprisingly pleasant compared to self-impalement.
The name is deceptive. The origin of this mead is a story of pure, bloody horror. It begins with a being named Kvasir, who was so profoundly wise that no one could ask him a question he couldn't answer. He wandered the world, spreading knowledge, until he accepted an invitation from two dwarves, Fjalar and Galar.
I feel like accepting invitations in Norse mythology is always a fatal mistake.
You are correct. The dwarves lured him into a private conversation and brutally murdered him. They drained his blood into two vats named Sun and Bodden and a massive cauldron named Odrerir. They then took Kvasir's blood and mixed it with honey.
They brewed mead out of a murder victim's blood?
Exactly. And this fermented blood mead was so powerful that anyone who drank even a drop of it would instantly become a brilliant scholar or a master poet.
That explains so much about the dark minds of poets, to be honest. So how does Odin get his hands on this blood mead?
The dwarves eventually crossed a giant named Suttung, who took the mead from them as compensation for murdering his parents. Suttung hid the massive vats of blood mead deep inside a mountain fortress called Hnitbjerg, and he placed his daughter Gunnlod in the dark caves to guard it. When Odin learned of this, he disguised himself as a laborer named Bolverk.
The All-Father puts on a hard hat.
A very dangerous hard hat. To get close to the mountain, Odin approached 9 thralls, slaves, who were cutting hay for Suttung's brother Baugi. Odin offered to sharpen their scythes with his magical whetstone. The blades cut so perfectly that the thralls all begged to buy the stone. Odin threw the stone high into the air, and in their greedy, desperate scramble to catch it, the 9 men slashed each other's throats with their own scythes, leaving them all dead in the field.
He orchestrated a mass murder of 9 innocent workers just to create a job opening?
Yes. He then went to Baugi, pointed out that his workers were dead, and offered to do the work of all 9 men for the entire summer. His only demanded payment was a single drink of Suttung's mead. Baugi agreed. When winter came, Odin had completed the superhuman labor and demanded his payment, but Suttung flatly refused to give him a single drop.
So Odin goes to Plan B.
Plan B is ruthless manipulation. He handed an auger, a massive drill named Rati, to Baugi and commanded him to bore a hole straight through the solid rock of the mountain. When the hole finally pierced through to the cavern where the mead was kept, Odin shapeshifted into a serpent and slithered through the tiny dark shaft, leaving Baugi behind.
So now he's a snake in a dark cave with the giant's daughter.
He slithers into the chamber and finds Gunnlod guarding the vats. He doesn't just overpower her, he uses his charm. He seduces the giantess, sleeping with her in the dark cavern for 3 consecutive nights.
Of course he does. He seduces the security guard.
After 3 nights of passion, she completely yields to him. She grants him permission to take just 3 drinks of the precious mead. In his first drink, Odin completely drains the cauldron Odrerir. In his second drink, he drains the vat Bodden. And in his third, he drains the vat Sun. He drank every single drop of the blood mead in existence.
He drank 3 massive vats of liquid in 3 gulps.
Instantly. Then, with the stolen intellect heavy in his belly, he shape-shifted into an eagle and violently flew out of the mountain, flying frantically toward Asgard. Suttung saw him, realized the deception, shifted into an eagle himself, and gave chase.
Seriously?
When the gods in Asgard saw Odin desperately flying toward them with Suttung close behind, they rushed out into the courtyard and set out large vats. The moment Odin flew over the walls of Asgard, he regurgitated the heavy, magical mead, spitting the honeyed blood from his beak down into the vats.
Wait, he threw it up? The origin of human poetry is the regurgitated blood mead of a giant, spat into buckets by a frantic eagle.
It gets even darker and slightly more pathetic. Suttung was so close on his tail that, in his panic to escape, Odin accidentally spilled some of the mead backward out of his rear end.
No way. You're making that up.
I am not. The myth explicitly states he spilled some behind him, and the gods didn't bother to collect that portion. Anyone in the world was free to take it, and it is known as the fool poet's drink. It is the source of all bad poetry in the world. But the pure mead that Odin successfully spat into the vats is a divine gift, which he grants only to the Aesir and to those few humans truly gifted in the art of poetry.
Let me summarize this. The All-Father, the wisest being in the universe, got his wisdom by mutilating his own face, crucifying himself, causing a massacre, seducing a woman in a cave, stealing her family's fermented blood, and then vomiting it into a bucket.
This is the brutal architecture of Asgard, Tom. To hold absolute power, to prepare for the inevitable end of the world, Odin must be entirely ruthless. He must gather magic, he must gather intellect, and above all, he must gather blood.
Wait. I need to understand the logistics here. You just said Odin has to gather blood and stockpile corpses for the apocalypse. How exactly does he do that? Does the All-Father just wander down to a muddy field in Midgard with a celestial wheelbarrow after a battle?
Ah, no, Tom. Odin rarely gets his own hands dirty in the mud of Midgard. The All-Father is a supreme delegator. To harvest the souls of the bravest men, he relies on a terrifying elite force of divine agents. Picture the grim reality of a Norse battlefield. Men are hacking each other to pieces, the earth is slick with gore, and the cries of the dying fill the air. As a warrior lies bleeding out in the mud, staring up into the stormy, darkened sky, he doesn't see a peaceful tunnel of light. He sees the Valkyries.
Valkyries, right. Pop culture has turned them into these beautiful, majestic, blonde warrior angels with shiny wings, like a heavenly rescue squad.
That is a sanitized, terrible misconception. They are not peaceful angels of mercy. They are fierce, relentless battle spirits, acting strictly under Odin's command. Odin sends the Valkyries to every single battle that takes place. Their purpose is absolute and terrifying. They govern life and death on the battlefield, and they alone dictate who wins.
Okay.
As the battle rages below, these fierce women ride their flying steeds through the air, hovering directly over the carnage. There is Rist and Mist, Skogul and Hild, Trud, Hlok, and many others. Even the youngest of the fate-weaving Norns, Skuld, constantly rides out with them to choose the slain and command the slaughter. They actively look down into the blood and the mud, evaluating the carnage, deciding exactly which screaming mortal is worthy of being ripped from the earth and which is doomed to rot.
So let me get this straight. Odin is literally farming humans. He is orchestrating these massive, bloody, horrific wars in Midgard, letting humans butcher each other, just so he can send his flying death squad down to harvest the absolute best killers for his own private army?
Precisely, Tom. He is the ultimate orchestrator of human violence. In fact, one of his most prominent titles is Val Fader, the father of the slain, specifically because he claims and adopts all those who fall in the slaughter as his own sons. They are transformed into the Einherjar, his chosen warriors. But here is the greatest twist of the celestial harvest. Odin does not get to keep all of the corpses he farms.
He doesn't? He's the supreme, omniscient dictator of the universe who hung himself on a tree for power. Who on earth has the leverage to take dead Vikings away from Odin?
Freya.
Freya, the goddess of love, the one you mentioned in the roll call who drives a chariot pulled by house cats. What does she want with a bunch of blood-soaked, dismembered berserkers?
Do not let her chariot of cats deceive you, Tom. Freya is the highest and most prominent of the Asynjur, the goddesses, and she commands a massive, beautiful estate in the heavens called Folkvang. The divine arrangement is strict. Whenever Freya rides into battle, she has the absolute right to claim exactly half of all the slain corpses for herself. Odin is only permitted to take the remaining half.
That is absolutely bizarre. So the ultimate bloodthirsty Viking warrior goes into battle, hacks his enemies apart, dies a brutal, screaming death in the mud, and when the terrifying battle spirits swoop down to pick him up, he essentially flips a coin. He has a 50-50 chance of either going to the All-Father's apocalyptic boot camp or ending up in the goddess of love's celestial cat estate.
It is a shocking duality, but it is absolute canon. Those she chooses are brought to her grand, beautiful hall named Sesrimne, located within Folkvang. She is as much a deity of death and battlefield harvest as Odin is. But for that other half, for the ones the Valkyries carry upwards into the golden gates of Odin's citadel, their eternal reward is Valhalla.
Valhalla, right? So this is where he stockpiles all those corpses for the literal apocalypse. Because when you are the omniscient, self-mutilating ruler of the cosmos, you don't stockpile grain or build fallout shelters. You stockpile dead bodies.
Exactly, Tom. He gathers these Einherjar, the chosen slain, directly into his ultimate fortress. But we need to dispel this modern sanitized pop culture myth of Valhalla as some joyous, peaceful Viking heaven where everyone just sits around singing songs. Valhalla is not a heaven of peace. It is a sprawling, terrifying monument to slaughter. It is the architecture of war made manifest.
Paint me a picture. What does this place actually look like when a dead warrior walks up to it?
It is designed to be instantly recognizable to any warrior, but on a nightmarish, divine scale. The rafters holding up the colossal structure are not made of timber. They are made of massive, heavy spears. The roof that stretches up into the sky is thatched entirely with gleaming golden shields.
So the building itself is just a giant armory.
Inside, the benches where the dead sit are strewn with coats of chainmail. But the most chilling detail greets you before you even cross the threshold. Hanging outside the western door is a crucified wolf, and hovering directly above it is an eagle dripping blood from its beak.
Crucified wolf as your front porch ornament. Very welcoming. What about the scale of this place? You mentioned Odin is stockpiling an army.
The scale is staggering. Valhalla has 540 massive doors.
No way.
And they are not standard doorways. When the end of the world, Ragnarok, finally arrives, 800 Einherjar will be able to march out of a single door, shoulder to shoulder, at the exact same time.
540 doors, with 800 guys marching out of each one abreast. That's 432,000 warriors. Just waiting. So, what do they actually do all day? Do they just sit on their chainmail benches polishing their swords?
Oh no. Odin requires them to be at the absolute peak of their lethal efficiency. Every single morning, the Einherjar put on their armor, march out into the great courtyard, and hack each other to bloody pieces.
Wait, they kill each other?
Yes, it is a daily, visceral massacre. They fight with full ferocity, severing limbs, cleaving skulls, and spilling oceans of blood onto the courtyard stones. This is their game, or sport.
So let me get this straight. The ultimate highest reward for a Viking warrior, the absolute pinnacle of spiritual achievement in this religion, is an eternity of waking up, walking outside, and getting brutally murdered by your roommates every single day. That sounds like a horror movie. That sounds like hell.
To a modern mind, perhaps, but to them it is glorious preparation, because the carnage is not permanent. When it draws near to mealtime, specifically at Davramol or noon, a dark magic takes hold. The severed limbs knit back together, the fatal wounds close, the dead rise from the bloody mud, completely healed, and they mount their horses to ride back into the great hall together in perfect peace to feast.
That is insane. They just brush the dirt off their reattached arms and head in for lunch. Speaking of lunch, you have over 400,000 colossal, battle-hungry warriors who have just spent the morning getting chopped into mulch. The caloric intake required must be astronomical. How do you feed them?
With a creature of eternal torment. In Valhalla, there is a magical boar named Serimnir. Every single day, the cook of the gods, whose name is Andrimnir, slaughters this boar and boils its flesh in a massive cauldron named Eldrimnir. No matter how vast the crowd of Einherjar is, the meat of this single boar is always enough to feed every last one of them. And by the evening, the boar is completely whole and alive again, ready to be butchered and boiled the next day.
An infinite magical meat pig. Every day it gets eaten alive, and every night it respawns just to get tossed back into the boiling pot. I guess humans aren't the only ones trapped in a cycle of daily carnage in Valhalla. Serimnir has it rough. And what are they drinking? I assume Odin isn't serving them water.
Water? Absolutely not. As the lore explicitly asks, would the All-Father invite kings, earls, and the greatest men of the world to his hall only to serve them water? Many of them suffered agonizing, fatal wounds to get there. They deserve better. They drink mead, but it doesn't come from a barrel.
Why do I feel like I'm not going to like where this mead comes from?
Standing high up on the golden roof of Valhalla is a goat named Heidrun. She stands there chewing on the leaves of a highly renowned tree called Lerad. And from Heidrun's udders flows a constant, endless stream of intoxicating mead.
No way.
It flows in such a massive volume that it fills colossal vats every single day, providing more than enough to get every single one of those hundreds of thousands of Einherjar blackout drunk.
A beer goat. You were telling me that the Grand Norse afterlife consists of waking up, getting hacked to death, respawning, and then coming inside to feast on an infinite magical meat pig and get drunk off a beer goat that lives on the roof.
That is precisely the theology, Tom. But interestingly, the All-Father himself does not partake in the meat. The food that is set on Odin's table is entirely given to his two wolves, Geri and Freki. Odin requires no solid food whatsoever. He sustains his immortal, all-knowing body entirely and exclusively on wine.
So Odin sits on his throne, sipping his wine, feeding his pet wolves pork from the eternal pig, and watching 500,000 warriors get roaring drunk off goat mead. It's majestic, it's grotesque, and it's utterly unhinged. But wait, you mentioned earlier that the gods raised a monster in Asgard. A wolf. If Odin already has 2 pet wolves, what made this other one so terrifying that it cost a god his hand?
Ah, you are speaking of Fenrir. And to understand the binding of that apocalyptic beast, we must look at the deepest, most primal fears of the Aesir. Fenrir was no ordinary wolf. He was one of the 3 monstrous children the trickster god Loki fathered with the giantess Angerboda in Jotunheim. When the Aesir discovered that these siblings were being raised in the land of the giants, they consulted their prophecies, which foretold that this specific offspring would bring them immense harm and disaster.
Let me guess. Their solution to a prophecy about a giant wolf bringing them ruin was to bring the giant wolf into their own home?
Exactly. Driven by a mix of arrogance and fear, the All-Father Odin had the beast brought to Asgard, where the gods decided to raise the wolf themselves. But Fenrir grew at an unnatural, terrifying rate every single day. He became so monstrous, so deeply intimidating, that out of the entire pantheon, only Tyr, the bravest god of martial courage, dared to approach the beast to feed him.
So they are harboring a rapidly growing weapon of mass destruction in their golden paradise?
Moving on.
And everyone is too terrified to even give it a bowl of food. Except for one guy. That sounds incredibly tense.
The tension evolved into outright panic. Seeing his size and remembering the dark prophecies, the Aesir knew they had to bind him, but they couldn't just attack him. They had to use deceit. They forged a massive, incredibly strong iron fetter called Löding, brought it to the wolf, and casually asked him to test his strength against it. Fenrir looked at the heavy iron, decided it was no match for him, and let them lock it on.
And?
The moment Fenrir stretched his legs and strained against it, the chain completely shattered.
Damn.
Terrified, the gods went back to their forges and created a second chain, Drome, which was twice as strong as the first. They brought it to Fenrir, telling him he would win eternal fame if he could break such masterful smithwork. The wolf calculated that his strength had grown, and knowing he had to risk danger to win fame, he allowed them to bind him again.
I feel like the gods are really pushing their luck here.
They were. When the Aesir declared they were ready, Fenrir shook himself, strained his massive muscles, and smashed the chain against the ground so violently that the iron fragments flew far into the distance. He had shattered Drome. The gods were now paralyzed by the fear that they would never be able to bind the beast.
So iron doesn't work. What's plan C?
Magic. Dark, ancient dwarf magic. Odin sent Frey's messenger, Skirnir, down into the subterranean world of Svartalfheim to commission the dwarves to forge a fetter. The dwarves created a chain called Gleipnir, but it wasn't made of metal. It was forged from 6 impossible things: the sound of a cat's footstep, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird.
6 literally impossible things. Arthur, I am trying to picture a dwarf in a subterranean blacksmith shop. He's wearing a leather apron, holding a heavy iron hammer, staring at his glowing anvil. How exactly does he forge a sound? How do you put a breath into a furnace? Did someone hand him a glass jar full of a fish's exhale and a burlap sack filled with the noise a cat makes? It physically does not make sense.
Excuse me for a moment, Tom. I am going to need a sip of my Earl Grey before I even begin to address that mortal confusion.
Are you really taking a tea break while my brain is melting?
I am letting your panic run its course, because you are thinking like a mortal, Tom. You are applying the crude logic of human blacksmithing to the dark subterranean magic of Svartalfheim. You must understand who the dwarves are. They did not begin as men. In the dawn of time, they crawled as maggots in the rotting dead flesh of the primordial giant Ymir. The gods gave them human understanding and human shape, but they dwelled deep within the earth and the stones. Their realm, Svartalfheim, is a place blacker than pitch. They are not merely bending hot iron. They are the master architects of reality itself. When they strike their anvils, they are forging unyielding cosmic concepts.
Okay, but still, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain.
To bind a creature that threatens to consume the world, you cannot use things that exist within the physical bounds of the world. Iron can be broken, stone can be shattered. So, the dwarves forged a restraint out of paradoxes. But here is the truly terrifying, chilling aspect of Norse magic, Tom. Taking these concepts to forge the ribbon actually had a permanent, devastating cost on our physical world.
What do you mean?
Magic requires sacrifice. Matter cannot be created from nothing. To weave the sound of a cat's footfall or the beard of a woman into the ribbon, the dwarves had to literally extract those things from the fabric of reality. They used them up. That is the exact reason why, to this very day, those things no longer exist.
Wait, are you saying...
Yes. The myth explicitly states that the reason these things are not found in the world anymore is because the dwarves took them all to make Gleipnir.
Okay.
That is why cats walk completely silently. That is why women do not have beards. That is why mountains do not have roots beneath them, and why fishes have no breath. The dwarves harvested the entirety of these concepts from the universe, leaving a permanent void in nature just to create this one weapon.
That is actually incredibly brilliant. It's a mythological explanation for the natural world, but it is also deeply unsettling. The gods literally broke the laws of nature and permanently altered reality just because they were afraid of a wolf they decided to raise in their own backyard.
The Aesir will pay any price to secure their power, and when the messenger Skirnir returned from the pitch-black depths of Svartalfheim and presented this ultimate weapon to the gods, they thanked him profusely. But what he handed them did not look like a weapon of mass containment. It was as smooth and soft as a delicate silken ribbon.
A silk ribbon. The entire universe's safety against an apocalyptic monster relies on a soft piece of silk made from fish breath and cat footsteps. It doesn't sound very structurally sound.
To the eye, it was fragile, completely harmless, but it contained all the terrifying, impossible power of things that had been erased from existence. It was unbreakable precisely because you cannot break something made of nothing. And armed with this delicate, impossible paradox, the gods took Fenrir out to an island called Lyngvi, in the middle of a lake called Amsvartne. They passed the silken ribbon around, showing the wolf how they couldn't break it with their own hands, and challenged him to tear it apart.
Fenrir isn't an idiot. He has to know this is a trap.
He did. Fenrir told them that there was no glory in tearing a fragile ribbon, and that if it was made with trickery and deceit, it would never touch his legs. The gods mocked him, claiming he was just afraid. So, the wolf issued an ultimatum. He would only allow himself to be bound if one of the gods placed their hand inside his jaws as a pledge that there was no treachery.
Oh, wow. A literal hostage situation.
The gods looked at one another in absolute silence. They were trapped by their own deceit. Nobody wanted to sacrifice their hand. Finally, Tyr stepped forward. Knowing exactly what it would cost him, he calmly placed his right hand directly into the beast's cavernous, saliva-dripping mouth.
Damn.
The gods tied the ribbon. Fenrir thrashed and fought, but the harder he struggled, the sharper and tighter the magical ribbon became. Realizing he was hopelessly trapped, the beast clamped his jaws shut.
Wow.
Tyr's hand was severed completely at the wrist. And Tom, do you know what the other gods did as they watched the blood pour from Tyr's stump?
Don't tell me.
They laughed. Every single one of the Aesir laughed, except for Tyr.
That is just chilling. They manipulate the creature, force one of their own to be mutilated, and their reaction is to stand around laughing at the carnage. They created their own worst enemy.
Their cruelty didn't end there. To secure the beast, they took the cord attached to the fetter, drew it through a massive stone slab, and anchored it deep into the earth with another colossal rock. The wolf gaped terribly, thrashing and trying to bite them. So, the gods took a sword and thrust it vertically into his mouth. The hilt jammed into his lower gum, and the point piercing his upper jaw.
A permanent, agonizing gag.
Yes, he howls horribly, and the drool and foam pouring endlessly from his jaws form a toxic river called Von. He will lie there, pinned to the earth with a blade in his mouth until the end of the world.
If they had him completely immobilized and a sword already in his mouth, why didn't they just kill him? If the prophecies said he was going to destroy them, why leave him alive?
Because, Tom, the gods respected their own holy sanctuaries and places of peace so much that they refused to defile the ground with the wolf's blood, even though the prophecies clearly state that Fenrir will ultimately be the death of Odin.
So their obsession with purity, with the illusion of this perfect golden sanctuary, forces them to keep their own doom alive, just waiting for the day it breaks free. It is a perfect, tragic circle of their own making.
It is. Asgard is a realm built on pure gold, but it is maintained through deception, brutal violence, and unimaginable sacrifice.
Well, I think that is all the existential dread we can handle for one episode. We've seen the golden halls, the bloody wall, the daily slaughter in Valhalla, and the terrifying lengths Odin and the Aesir will go to in order to maintain their grip on power.
Indeed, but the walls of Asgard only hold back the darkness for so long. Next time on episode 3, we are going to look beyond the fortress. We will delve into the wilds of Jotunheim and the darker realms, and we will finally focus entirely on the architect of so much of this chaos, Loki, the trickster, the shapeshifter, and the father of monsters.
If his horse seduction and wolf-binding antics were just the preamble, I can't wait to see what he actually does for an encore. But before we wrap up today, guys, Arthur has an answer for literally everything, from magical beer goats to toxic ice. And quite frankly, I want to see if we can stump him.
I highly doubt that is possible, Tom.
We'll see about that. Drop your weirdest, darkest, or most confusing Norse mythology questions in the comments below. If we get enough of them, I'll force him to do a dedicated Q&A episode where we just roast the pantheon.
A fool's errand, but I humbly accept the challenge. Bring me your inquiries, mortals. I shall endeavor to illuminate the darkness of your confusion.
Challenge accepted. Thank you for listening, everyone. Sleep well, and maybe don't offer to hand feed any giant wolves.
Until next time.
Jesper, I'm starving. Arthur just spent an hour talking about boiling an infinite magic pig and getting drunk off a goat on the roof. Since you're the actual chef here, what are the odds we can get some normal food that hasn't been reassembled by dark magic?
I wouldn't object to a decent sandwich. Preferably something British, if the kitchen permits.
Come on, gentlemen. 55 minutes of cosmic dread and blood harvest, and all you can think about is food? Okay, give me 10 minutes.
Yes, the All-Father delivers.
Just don't forget the lemon for the tea next time.